Good evening, all of you. I'm sorry for the sudden change of the schedule, though I had planned to take the class this evening by 6:30, but a couple of challenges I am managing and juggling at home. I apologize for that. I had to also cancel the MSP program last Saturday. Anyways, I'm trying to compensate the session of the evening by this recorded session. So my intention was to teach population geography, cover of 3-4 topics, and have enough content for you to revise till we start off again. So let's start off now the discussions. So please spend time seeing the video properly, take your notes, make your jottings, revise your notes, and I'll suggest what type of questions you may be preparing for. Okay. So now let's look at the whiteboard. Now in population geography, I suggest that you should study paper 1 and paper 2 at the same time. Please do not be selective here, because every year they are asking at least 2 or 3 questions from population geography. So you have paper 1 or 2 questions, and paper 2 also 1 or 2 questions. Like last year, they have asked 2 questions from paper 1, population, and 1 or 2 questions of paper 2. So do not be selective here. And you need to be prepared for 4-5 type of questions. So 4-5 type of questions include, number 1 is, they can ask you on theories. So Malthus theory, DTM theory, you have your Marxian theory, and they have been asking consistently, but you'll have to add a few more theories so that your answer stays enriched. Second is, you have to study migration. The last time they asked a question migration was 2017, and I think this year too they can ask you a question on migration. The 17th question was based on the consequences of migration. Okay, theories they have not asked, but it's possible. You can be ready for this. The third type of question in population geography are around demographic attributes. So fertility ratio, okay, they have asked paper 1. In paper 2, they have asked questions on sex ratio. They have also asked on literacy rates. Okay, we have had one question on geriatrics also, but geriatrics is more like a discussion on population problems. So the fourth category of question that they can ask you will be questions on population problems. So we're looking at poverty problem, malnutrition problem, geriatrics issues, and the concerns about like a demographic dividend. They can ask you questions related, even sex ratio can also be a part of the concerns. Okay, so they can ask you questions related to solutions. So social well-being has been popularly asked. Social capital also has been asked. So I can see these broad range of questions. My suggestion to you is, whenever you answer a question on population, keep 3 things in mind. Okay. 1, please make sure that you are having enough data with you. You have enough facts. You have examples with you. Okay. You have examples. You have the demographic census details wherever required. Okay, so make sure you have that. The second thing you must be careful about is make sure your answer has reference to theories and concepts, okay, which make the answer look like a studied and a geography-based answer. So Malthus theory, Marxian theory, DTM theory, optimum population concept, Ravenstein's migration theory, if required, whatever concepts we have around social theories of migration. So something which is conceptual. You can also use the concept of population pyramid. That's also a typical hardcore geographical tool to analyze some aspects of demography. And the third thing, please keep in mind is, please draw distributional maps. Every discussion on population can have something which can be depicted on the maps. Say, demographic attribute distribution across different parts of the world. You can discuss application of some of the migration concepts, and you can use flow diagrams to show how the population has moved from one place to another. You can also show sex ratio, literacy rates in terms of maps. So make sure you have done these three things while discussing the population questions in paper 1 and also in paper 2. Okay. Now, next is we can start discussing some of the concepts that I have thought about this session. So let us start with the concept of population distribution. So that's our first discussion today. What is population distribution? I have discussed this concept in the enrichment sessions last year, but because not all of you were part of the sessions, so I'm repeating it. Of course, we'll have some enrichment on this also. Okay, so I'm discussing the concept here. The concept of population distribution. Now, conventionally speaking, there are two ways we discuss distribution. One is in terms of density, and second is in terms of percentage of population in a region. In terms of density and in terms of percentage of population in a region. Now, if you're looking at density, if I'm studying density, density is actually not a measure of distribution. Because if I'm looking at an area, say this is a region I'm discussing, and I'm saying the density is the total population of the place divided by area of that particular place, what I'm assuming is that this population is uniformly distributed across the area, and in this area per unit, okay, measure what is the amount of concentration. So because I'm assuming the population is uniformly distributed, this actually does not give me the distribution. This is not actually a spatial pattern measure. This is more of a nominal concept with the assumption that the population is uniformly spread. So conventionally, although we use density as one of the measures of population, but this is not the best measure. Whereas a more reliable measure for distribution is the percentage measure. So if this is A, so the more reliable measure is the percentage, where we find out what is the percentage of population in different regions. So if this was the area I'm referring to, and this area is subdivided into regions of this kind, and I say this region has 20% of population, this region has 10% of population, this region has 30% of population. Typically what we have done was studying the population distribution of the world. So we have identified the primary pockets, the secondary pockets, the tertiary pockets, and we have said that the primary pockets include South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, we have Western Europe, okay? So we have the regions from Asia, we have regions from Europe, we have regions of North America. And if you remember, Asia, we have said, has around 60% of population. North America has around 9 to 10% of the population. So when we have this type of study, we call that as percentage population in different regions. Now, this is definitely a measure of distribution. This is not simply telling us or assuming the population is uniformly distributed. So these two are conventionally used while discussing the population distribution. But there are other measures. There are other measures. And I'm giving you two such measures of distribution. There are two other measures of distribution. One, what is called as the measure of median population. The measure of median population or median point of population. And the second being the measure of the mean point of population. So quickly, what are these? So when I say median population, so if you remember a bit of statistics, a median is a measure that divides a distribution into two equal halves. Okay, it's a kind of a tool we are using to divide any type of a distribution or any statistical aggregate into two equal halves. So what we do in this median point measure is, say if this is the area I'm talking about, and if this is the population distribution, okay, I'm assuming the population is not uniformly spread. If this is the distribution, maybe some people here and here also. So what we do is, we draw two perpendicular lines. We draw two perpendicular lines. One is a vertical line which divides the population into two equal halves, right and left. And the second is a horizontal line that equally divides the population top and bottom. So in this diagram, I had deliberately shown there are more people towards south. So the horizontal line will be more towards the south. And if you look at the overall region, I have deliberately shown the population to be more on the right. So this vertical line will be more towards the right. And where they intersect, this is the median point. This is the median point. So median point kind of tells us, okay, what is the population concentration center. And this is a very good measure if I want to find out how in time population distribution centers have shifted. How have they shifted? For example, okay, say in 1700s, this was the center. Then 1800s, maybe this was a center. In 1900s, maybe this was a center. It tells us the population is gradually gravitating towards the north. This is a very good way to understand that how population across time shifts its median position for whatever reasons. It could be change of resources, maybe the ecology has changed, the environment has changed, the economic systems have changed, and the population shift. So that's one important measure of distribution. The other important measure of distribution is the mean point. Second is the mean point. I'll suggest while you're seeing the video, please do pause and take down some jottings. Okay, quickly, two line, three line small diagrams. That ways you are involved in the process of active learning and not simply watching the video, okay, blindly, right? So make sure you're doing that. Anyways, in the mean point measure, what is done is, if this is the area of study and if this is the population distribution, okay, in reality, so in mean point, I try to find a location about which this plane can be balanced. It's like I'm assuming that each of these population centers are the weights on this irregular disk. So if I was to balance this disk, like finding the center of gravity, what would the center be? So this is that mean position. This is the mean position. But one problem with this is, this again can be misleading. Why? Because the population distribution can be such that the mean position or the population, we also call this as the population center of gravity. This can actually fall in an uninhabited area. So if I say this is the position of the mean population, okay, it does not tell us whether the population actually resides in this place or elsewhere. But nevertheless, this is one of the measures that we have for distribution of population. So I repeat that if you're looking at distribution, there are two things. One is the distribution studied in terms of what is the density, the conventional measure there. And we also have been studying the distribution in terms of what is the percentage in an area. Apart from these two, I have mentioned two more measures. One is the median measure, where I'm trying to find out the center around which the population is clustered. And the second being the mean method, which is something like the center of gravity of a distribution, about which that particular region can be balanced. And each of this has its own merit and demerits. So that's about population distribution, okay, which is appropriate. The next is studying quickly what are the density measures. Okay, the density measures. Now, if I look at density, the conventional measure is total population by total area. But then this is also referred to as the crude arithmetic density. But there are other measures also. In density, there are other measures. So the two very important ones, one is what's called as the physiological density. The physiological density, which is the population divided by area. But in this, we consider only the agricultural area. Okay? We consider only the land which is agriculturally, okay, fit or cultivable area. This is also referred to as nutritional density. It's also referred to as the nutritional density. Now, what this measure does is, it gives us an idea about what is the pressure of population on agricultural land resources. Imagine countries like Egypt. or countries like Russia, okay, or even countries like some of the large countries but not agricultural land, Brazil. Okay. So these countries might have very low overall population, but they can have very, very high physiological density. Why? Because the agricultural land is very, very less, implying that the pressure on the land for cultivation is very, very high. So that's one measure. The other measure of density is what's called as agriculture density. Now, this measure made sense earlier, but now no longer in use. But fine, because we have this term, we could always mention it. Agriculture density is equal to, okay, the population of farmers divided by agriculture land. This is one way of knowing what is the potential of the farming economy. Okay, and whether the farming economy is stressed or not. Okay, so these are the important measures of density. And I repeat, the density measure is not actually a measure of population distribution. That this is actually not a measure of spatial pattern. Okay, so that's one concept. And if you want to add something more, we have a third concept, and this concept was given by George He gave the concept of what's called as economic density. Economic density. And there's a formula for this. Economic density is equal to Nk divided by S and K dash. N, K, S and K dash, where N is the number of inhabitants. Please write down while I speak. N is the number of inhabitants. K is the quantity of resources produced per square kilometer. K is the quantity of resources produced per square kilometer. S, like S is the area in square kilometer. S is the area in square kilometer. And K dash is the per capita quantity of requirements. K dash is per capita quantity of requirements. So this basically is a measure of what is the requirement of the population and what is the availability of the resources to meet the requirements of the population. This is about what is the requirement in terms of economic growth, or whatever we want to measure it as, requirement for economic growth or development of the population. Okay. And what are the resources and their ability to meet the expected requirements of growth or development. So this more or less is the discussion on the density and distribution. You can always add some discussions related to what are the factors that affect. Discussions on what are the factors that affect population distribution. So this shouldn't be easy, shouldn't be difficult, sorry. You can talk about physical factors, climate, terrain, resources, and you can also talk about the human factors. The human factors. So human factors, which includes migration, human factors that include levels of technology development, even there can be political factors where policies attract population to some places or some regions. Okay, so what are the human factors? So this, I believe, you can handle on your own. So this discussion was on population distribution. Okay. I'll share other videos also where I'll discuss some more concepts. Thank you.